Hello and welcome to the Her Effect podcast. I'm so excited about this particular episode. This, first of all, is the very first interview I've done for our podcast. And I'm excited about the topic we're going to cover today. I know so many of you amazing mothers out there have been tossed right into the middle of teaching your kids at home. And I have with us today Heather Torres, who is really, when we first met, it was on a stage and she leaned over and whispered and said, "We're going to be besties." And we don't get to talk a lot, but when we do, it's a lot of fun. And here's a couple things about Heather that I think all of you ladies will appreciate. One is she's the mother of three amazing children. You guys are in Vegas, right? In Las
Yeah.
Vegas.
Yeah, we raise our kids in Sin City. So let's talk about that also.
Yes. And you are the COO of Think Media, which is an online company, an educational company that teaches online entrepreneurs how to use video. Is that correct?
Yeah, we specialize in YouTube and our goal is to really just help entrepreneurs learn how to grow their influence using video, like using webcams and, understanding YouTube and all the ways that you can use video to grow your business.
Oh my gosh. So check her out there. But then one of the most fun things too that I think you guys will really love is Heather is also homeschooling her children. And she's actually what I would consider a homeschool expert. So you have your own side hustle where you're helping women and teaching women how to do this pretty much stress free for the most part, right?
Yeah, yeah. I look at it as a holistic living. So in the
Yeah.
idea that education is actually just a part of who our children are, and as they grow, we're just bringing them alongside on the journey that we're on. So it's not actually separating the two. Really, it's really combining my world and their world as we learn and grow together.
Okay. I love this 100% more than I did 2 seconds ago. That's amazing. I love that. Well, I'm a homeschool mom, but I have tutors. What I love about your story, and I want to just dive into this, is that you and your husband are actually teaching your children. So you didn't hire that out. You guys are doing that. So let's start with the beginning. Let's hear your story, Heather, and where you've come from and how you've gotten to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, if I always like to say when I start out that, well, first off, thank you so much for having me on. Like to be the first interview, I'm going to write that in my journal. And so I can always have that to look back on. I was the friend that leaned over and was like, we're going to be best friends. God just told me. So I'm so glad that this is the first of many opportunities where we get to chat online together. But if you would have told me a decade ago that I was going to be a homeschool mom, I would have laughed in your face. Like I would have, it was not even on the radar for me. I was a career woman. I was someone that was like, I will have nannies. My kids will be in all extracurriculars. I want to be a mom, but I also really want to be a career woman. And I didn't see how those two things could mesh because I had never seen it happen before. And so my version of what motherhood and career looked like was not actually doing that, was like being an evening mom, a weekend mom, that type of thing. But I was so focused on being an entrepreneur. And man, I just went on this journey. It happened over a course of 2 years. So first off, to all the mamas right now who this was just kind of thrown in their face, I have massive empathy for you because choosing homeschooling, choosing learning from home was a choice for me. And so I had time to prepare myself. I did a lot of research. I went through a lot of things. And so my first thing is like if you're doing this since your first year and it wasn't the plan last year to do that this year and everything that happened, you're doing it. I have mass empathy for you because I feel so lucky that I got to choose this as I went through it. Let me tell you what that looked like. So I was running a company. I had a baby on the hip. I had one in a carrier. Right. I was working that kind of mom life as I was growing a company, and we put my daughter in private preschool. My son was like, "Let's do the YMCA." I had a nanny. I did all those things, but I just had this tugging of like, I wonder if there's a different way. I've always been an out of the box thinker. I was not really great at school. I didn't excel at it. I did what I needed to do to get through. And so for me, I was like, well, if I already am living kind of this unconventional life of not necessarily having the 9 to 5, but really having the side hustle that was kind of growing into something, if I'm already an out of the box thinker, why am I still trying to put my children in the box? Like, are there other ways? And so I kind of went on this journey as we decided to move to Las Vegas. I was like, I don't really know if that's the best educational system. Lo and behold, we're like 49 out of 50. It's not the best place in terms of public education. And so I really went down this journey of how do kids learn? In my personal life, I was teaching women how to get clarity. And I'm like, people don't understand problem solving or they don't understand clarity in their life. They don't quite understand how to have good habits or all these things in adulthood that we can actually do in childhood and make those routine and habits form early on. And so through reading a ton of books and doing a lot of research, I took the leap and I created school at home, which I do not recommend. That is not what I recommend doing. I fully failed the first year. I tell everyone I failed hardcore. I had all the worksheets, I had the pretty binders. I was like, I am going to mom school this up. I am going to be awesome. And it totally flopped. My kids did not want to sit down. They were running around. They wanted to just play in the dirt. And that was life as a homeschooler. And so I dug more and more into, well, what is child led learning and how is that different from actually, curriculum based learning? And through a lot of different adjustments and prayer and things, we're now at this place in our path where we have two middle schoolers and an elementary school kiddo. And we do child led learning. And so we don't necessarily go off of a specific curriculum. We do certain things where we're creating good, healthy habits early on so that as they grow and prosper in life, they will be carrying those things with them. And I do believe that if you have good, healthy habits in place, you can achieve anything. And so that's where our philosophy with homeschooling and child led learning kind of is. We can dive more into that, but that's kind of like the gist of my story. I've been on this roller coaster for several years now. I say roller coaster because every back to school season, I'm like, is this the right choice? Am I doing everything? What should I do? And then it like plummets. And then I'm like, yes, I'm a rock star at this. So it goes all over the place. But it's a journey and I love what we do. And our kids are thriving in what they're doing. And yeah, so that's kind of my journey to where we are today.
Wow. Okay. So let's unpack a couple things. The first thing that really struck me is that you're more unschooling than you are homeschooling, which is really the school of thought that we really try to follow is child-led learning. But I really want to learn from you in all of this. So first of all, let's kind of unpack unschooling, but I also want you to talk about you said if you have healthy habits, you can do anything. And so I want to talk about like what does that look like? So
Yeah. Yeah. So unschooling, if you're not familiar with that, that basically just means that you allow your children to have choice. You allow them to have freedom. And from the outside, it looks like kids aren't doing anything. It really does. Like that's at first when I was like introduced to this world, I was like, no, we are going to buy all the curriculum. We're going to read all the books. We're going to
Yeah.
do all the things. We're going to check all the boxes. That didn't work for us. And so I had to figure out a new way. And so I started really researching. I read the book, Free to Learn. Man, I can't remember the author all of a sudden, Free to Learn. And it really opened my eyes to the idea that, wow, when I'm curious about something, I go deep into wanting to learn what that is. Like, I went to college. I dropped out because what I was learning in my marketing classes was not even what was happening in the world. And so I took the rest of my education dollars and invested in online courses to learn from the experts. And I dove deep. And that's how I learned. That's how I grew a career. That's how I did all the things was because I was passionate about understanding marketing and psychology and online business and video and all those things. And so I was like, if my kids are like crazy about, say, dinosaurs or piano or gardening or whatever it is that it sparks their interest, I believe that God's given us individual gifts and talents. And to
Right.
suppress those, right, for 18 years and then say, okay, now go in the world and figure out what you want to do, it
Yeah.
just like saying it out loud seems kind of backwards, right? And so, how we kind of got to the point where we are now is I was like, what do you want to learn? That's been our main question. Every single month we ask this same question. What do you want to learn? And you'd be so surprised at your kids' ability to identify what their passions are and what they're curious about. And if there's one thing that is so core to our philosophy in homeschooling, it's that curiosity and problem solving are our main tenets, I guess you could say, of homeschooling. Are you curious about this? How can I best support you? So I'm not technically teaching them anything. I'm putting the right resources or people or classes or books in front of them as a learning buffet. And I say, go for it. What do you want to learn? And so my
Right.
daughter, let's take her for example. She's 11. She's really into space right now. I took her to the library. She was there for 2 hours looking at her own books to find, what she wanted to learn. She also wants to take a high school level chemistry class because she's very much into chemistry. I did not tell her to take that. She just wants to challenge herself. And so now we're looking at what are some online availabilities for her to be able to do that. So it all just kind of goes along with letting go of what we think is the only way and
Mm,
actually asking why. Why do we put math and science over the arts and music? Why do we need to test for certain things and not for others? Are these even good? Are these even bad? Like really questioning a lot of things. And so that's kind of
mm.
where we are with, I guess, quote unquote, unschooling. Now, we still do like I want them to be good adults. So they're learning financial literacy, they learn math facts, they're learning standards in English and language. Like they're learning things to be good citizens, but I also think things like service is undervalued. How can I serve my neighbor? I think that home ed or home etiquette type things, like understanding how to organize a shoe closet to me is just as important as understanding the scientific pyramid. Like because what are you going to use in your life, you know? So we look at everything we do as a learning opportunity. So my daughter's into tie dyeing right now. I'm using her as the main example. She's learning how to set up a business. She's learning how to build a website. She's learning payment structure. She's learning how to do a Venmo. She's learning how to transfer to her account. Like she's learning how to price out materials and all like things that you can't get from a book. She's learning it because she's passionate about it. And I value, we don't put certain things except for the Bible above anything else. The Bible is the first thing in our homeschool that is God's word, that is truth, and everything else falls below that. And so we just put things on the same weight and say, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? And so that's kind of our unschooling philosophy of how we teach.
Oh my goodness. Okay. First of all, can I go back 20 years and have you be my teacher? I'm so inspired listening to you because as a visionary, I think about the future. If all of our children had that opportunity, what kind of a world could we create? All these thinkers and doers and learners and people who are operating in their giftings.
Mhm.
I totally agree with you. I feel like so much of school is attached to this idea of making money, like, oh, get a good education so that you can get a good job. And I'm like, you've wasted 18 years of your life now. You have to go figure stuff out. And the whole idea is we have a responsibility to prepare our children to operate in what they've been, you know, where their bents are. And so, man,
Yeah.
just
And
hearing you is like, wow, so
yeah,
exciting.
and one thing for us too is we value contribution. That's a huge part of ours because if you look at even our society and how we've structured education right now, kids go away and parents go somewhere, and like there's this whole separation of family um, because I mean, well, if you look back at even history, there were children who would like work on the farms or they would, they were in labor opportunities. They were doing things to serve others. They were helping their families. They were doing these things. Obviously, child labor laws and things like that came to effect. And that's why school attendance happens and all those things. But when you think about it, we're not even giving children the opportunity to contribute to society until they're of age. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help them learn in the small little things, right? Like I'd rather them make small little mistakes younger and contribute, right? Like, shoot, I shouldn't have spent $50 on that. I should have only spent 10, those type of things to be able to contribute to our family life. So our children help us do our family budget. They know how much money is in all of our accounts because I want them to see how money works and what money does. And they help us with all of our grocery shopping. And we put them in charge of those things because we
Oh my
want them to be able to contribute at an early age. Because when you feel like you are doing something that is of service to others, you're always blessed. And so, why not already just put that in motion for them to know that they can learn how to contribute and bless others rather than feeling like you have to wait till you're 16 or 18 to get a job start a business, go help the neighbor, do these things, bake some cookies, whatever that looks like. And really just help them to start to understand that our society functions by people becoming problem solvers for other people. The jobs we're doing right now did not exist 15 years ago. They're
Yeah,
going to go through a whole thing of school and not even have the same type of jobs that we currently have right now. They need to be able to pivot and adapt and contribute to whatever the society is at that time.
100%. So paint us a picture of what is the end result? Like, where do you see your children when they're ready to leave home?
Yeah, really
Like
good
what the work
question.
you're doing now.
We've been my husband and I have really been having some deep conversations about this. We want to launch our children into the world and have them leave the nest. That's like goal number 1. They're going to do that. Um we also don't overvalue a college education more than say a trade school or a firefighter or a policeman or whatever that looks like. So what does that look like for them? We want to prepare them for opportunities to help them grow and deepen the gifts and talents God has given them. So what that looks like is if they want to go to college, homeschoolers go to college all the time. They can get into Ivy
Yeah.
League schools. You actually, as a homeschooler in our state specifically, you can take your GED test at 16 and start taking college courses and finish at 18 with your associates as a homeschooler. So you can all of the opportunities are available the same for homeschoolers as say an accredited high school um, curriculum would allow you, especially now with so much remote learning and things like that happening. But for us specifically, we want to raise adults with good character, with good integrity, that have a heart for people, that love Jesus, and that are using the gifts and talents that God has given them in whatever way that is right for them. So if one of my kids wants to become a neuroscientist and the other one wants to open a business and one wants to be a computer gamer, I will not value one of those careers over the other because that's who God created them to be. And just from my own experience of being in so many different roles throughout my life, I know that probably what they choose at 18 probably won't be what they are at 30. And so I want to just encourage them to keep diving deeper into their curiosity as they grow and mature and start their own families and do those things. But to us, it's just good citizens who are doing their civic duties and contributing to society and being of good service to their neighbor.
That's incredible. I wish I wish that, my hope here is that as women are, men and women are listening to this podcast, that they're feeling the freedom in it doesn't have to look like what we think it looks like in
Hmm.
this homeschool world of and I know for me, I'm right there with you. You're speaking my language. I'm like, we've totally scrapped most of the curriculum except for the reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yep.
But so this is something you teach. Like this is your side hustle
Yeah.
is empowering and activating women in their ability to teach their children at home, whatever
Yep.
that looks like. So talk to the struggle. Like what are the biggest struggles you see, especially women facing? And what's your advice?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. Setting proper expectations is a huge piece of it. If you look at Instagram and Pinterest, it looks completely different than what real homeschool looks like. I mean, just the same as like my house does not look Instagram worthy, it's not. And so what we've been shown, especially if we've been raised, my husband and I were both only raised in public school. So we only know one way. So getting around other people who are doing this is key. Having a community around you who supports these types of decisions, I think is really important because if you're trying to do this alone, it can feel really hard. I think also our idea that school only happens Monday through Friday from 9 to 3 with a lunch break at noon and 5 snacks and recess or whatever those time constraints are. It sounds kind of weird, but like we kind of live outside of time. I don't know if that like we have
Yeah.
24 hours in a day. So if the reading happens at noon while we're eating lunch, that's fine too. Like it doesn't have to happen. So how was I able to do a side hustle and then run a company and homeschool at the same time is that I don't look at time the same way. Right. Like right now, my kids are reading because I'm on a podcast. And then after this, we're going to play a board game together. And then I have some meetings this afternoon. They're going to do an hour of focused learning in what they're interested in. So I work my schedule and my kids work within that schedule around what they're doing. We homeschool on Saturday and Sundays too, because every day is worth learning. And so it's
And
not
it's
like there's
fun.
formal. Exactly. It's all fun. So my son and I planted a garden over the last weekend. That was his school. Like learn like what type of fertilizer do you need? I'm not bringing the answers to him. He's having to figure it out. And so he's telling me about the compost we need to do and I need this much nitrogen in the soil and all these things. I'm like, "Cool, bro. What do I need to buy when we go to the store, you know?" So yeah, I think my advice would be get in community. There's online communities, there's communities in your area. I know right now it's, distant learning and all of these things, but being connected to other homeschoolers allows you to see that there's other opportunities. So if you're just starting, there'd be that. And then setting the right expectations. Are like every day, if we can read our Bibles together and get our family contributions done, we win. Like our days, we win. So anything above that is just icing on the cake. And that might sound weird because you probably think, well, what about reading and what about math and what about writing? Your kids, when they have freedom, do those things anyways. And so, my daughter, she's writing a book, she's writing a novel. She decided to do that on her own because I said no electronics, that's just what she
Yeah.
decided to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's setting the right expectations to know that you're probably not going to check every box. Every day is going to look a little bit different. To know that every day is a new day to show up and be expectant for what God is going to do with your children. I think if we walk into it and we're like, oh, I have to do this again. Well, if our attitudes are like that, their attitudes are going to be like that. And then just knowing that if you have young ones, let them just play and let them have fun and let them be curious and read to them. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if all you got done was just reading to your kids every day, they will be so smart because you can learn so much from reading with your kids. So that's kind of where I would say for if you're in that place of kind of like, this is really hard, it is hard because you've taken on the responsibility of educating your child. But God's given you that already. You were their first teacher. You taught them how to do everything up to the point of age 5 where our society then says you're no longer qualified. But if you can get up every day, put your pants on, make some coffee, pay the bills, if you can do those things, you're qualified to teach children. Like you are. It's not that hard to actually get it done. So,
Oh my gosh, I love how you have simplified this. I think about I love how you're talking about society. It's something that I think people need to really recognize is that we've been programmed to think a certain way
mhm.
about education. I grew up homeschooled. My dad took me out on job sites with him. I did most of my schooling out in the real world. And I credit a lot of the way that I think now because of that. I was out of the box, like what you're talking about. So, one thing that really struck me about what you said too is okay, like if you're going to plant a garden, they're going to go do the research. Where does electronics and Google play into that? Because I know today in today's society, and let's just get real moms, like I
Yep.
have 4 boys, I think about how are we going to protect our kids from pornography and weird things popping up on YouTube? And how do you give your kids the freedom and the boundaries to do their research while protecting their innocence?
Yeah, really great question. I think there's a couple things. One, we've had those conversations very early on, like
Mm.
from like when they're able to understand. We start having conversations about like pornography and about pictures, and there's a really good book series. Shoot, I wish I had it. What's it called? Oh, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I recommend that book. There's a younger kids version and then elementary kids version. And it really just it talks specifically about that. It's that idea that like, this is in our world. And so you need to learn how you protect yourself. We don't do electronics in your rooms alone. So electronics are in public spaces in our home. If you are in your room with an electronic, then you're only allowed to have the reading app on. And I can go in and see what apps they're on. I can go to their screen time. I do that with them there. I show them that I'm looking at their screen time so I can see what apps that they're on. And then I do a lot of things right next to them. So I'll be sitting at this desk working on Facebook ads, and they'll be sitting right here watching a YouTube video about gardening or whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
So we really do it in a collaborative way.
Mm.
We For us, I love technology. We use a lot of technology in our home. But we also make sure that we're just safeguarded with understanding, and they'll tell me, they'll come to me and be like, "Oh, this video ad popped up after," and I closed the computer. I'm like, "Good job, buddy," and encouraging them to know that it is a part of our world. But if we do it next to them, if we do it alongside them, if we show them healthy habits, like me not sitting scrolling on my phone in front of them all the time, that's a healthy habit where I'm like, electronics are used for these things, and that's what we use them for. We don't necessarily use them for um, mindless time, if that makes sense. We really
Yes.
use them as a tool, and when it's
Mhm.
taught to be used as a tool and not just a numbing piece of our life, I think it brings great value to it.
Wow. How do you do this with your husband? Like, what's his part to play? How do you do this as a family?
Yeah.
For maybe the moms that are like, I think I'd have to do this alone, or, is that, um, what's your advice for the mom who's going to be on her own?
Yeah. So at first, my husband was all on board with the decision as long as I did it. That was like our first agreement was like, cool, I'm all for this, but I don't know how to teach children. I don't really want to teach children. I have my career, and he was very supportive of it, but it was very much like, that's what you do during the day when I'm not home. And I'm like,
Mhm.
cool. So we started off like that. And slowly, your kids are always asking questions, right? Like, think about it right now. Your kids will ask you questions, they'll ask dad questions. It all just becomes a part of what your home is like. And so,
Mhm.
how we kind of transitioned past that was one, I started putting resources in my husband's way. Like, hey, we should read this book together. And so we read Free to Learn together, and it really opened up his eyes to the idea of how we could do home education together. And so I started putting resources. He was a little reluctant at first. He was like, I don't really want to read a book about school. Like, that doesn't sound fun at all to me. But he did it because he loves me. And so we did that. And for the first few years, he worked in corporate America, and so it wasn't something on his radar. But then when I started doing things like, "Hey, I have to handle this client. Could you just do math on Saturday?" Or, "Hey, I have to do this. Can you," and I just started putting things in his path. And through trial and error, he just lit on fire with it. And as we started to loosen the idea of what was right and wrong, like, meaning, oh, we didn't get through all of the language arts today, or, once we just kind of like let go of checking all the boxes and doing all the things and cramming all the subjects in, once we let that go over a summer, when we did, when we brought another little guy, our third child is an adoptive child. And so we brought him in. We had to go through a whole deschooling, which means not doing any types of formal things at all so that he could actually get settled into our home. And when we went through that phase was when my husband really started to dive in, and he just came full circle for what that looks like. But if your question was, what if you're the mom doing this on your own? I would say give your husband opportunities to read to your kids, to take them on the field trip, do it on a Saturday versus a Tuesday. Like, let him be involved in the process. And because he loves you and because he loves your children, they usually jump on board. I don't know. What about you, Jamie? Did your husband jump right on board?
Yeah, well, he is a teacher by trade, and so we basically from the very beginning, our kids have never been in a public school
Yep.
environment. We agreed from the beginning that we were gonna do this, and I don't have, like, the I remember sitting down for an hour one time trying to teach the boys how to tell time, and I couldn't seem to, like, get it, and I was like, "Nope." I
Yeah.
So the first, 6, 7 years was me focusing more on character and work ethic and how to like critical reasoning and scripture.
Yep.
And I was less concerned about can they do they have good spelling and now that and I was also building a business too. So my focus was like, get this thing going here so that I can hire a tutor or get help. But I love that the way you're talking about it here is that it really is so much less formal than what we make it.
Hmm.
And I believe truly exactly what you said. If you can do these few basic things, you're qualified to teach your kids.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to we got to break the mold. And so I think some of my biggest questions are, you know, what are the biggest mistakes you see people making, and how can you help them avert those as they're going into saying yes to this whole new lifestyle of education in the
Mhm.
home?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes I see is people actually jumping into the big box things too quickly. So I see this mistake so often. This is the number one question I get in my community is what curriculum should I use? And
Mhm.
I'm like, that is such, and I understand that question because I was there. I was thinking the same thing because I'm thinking, how do I cover all these subjects? What is grade appropriate? Grade levels and all those things. We've thrown those out the window as well. Yeah, with all
Oh,
about
yeah.
where you are.
Us
Like,
too.
I don't know what grade my kids are in. I mean, technically they'd be, that's why I say middle school, because I'm like, they're within the middle school age range. Yeah. So one of the
Us
mistakes I
too.
see is jumping in and spending all this money on this like one curriculum that people have touted to be this is the best and this is everything you need. And then you open it up the first couple days and you're like, shoot, this isn't going to work. And then you're lost and you're like, what do I do? Because you feel like you kind of failed because how come this works for everyone else and it doesn't work for us? Well, because every family is so uniquely different and every child is so uniquely different. So, one
None.
of the mistakes I see people make is really actually jumping into formal homeschooling too quickly.
Yeah.
You can actually do an entire year where all you do is read the Bible, go to the library, play outside, work on learning how to like fold laundry and clean your room, listen to audiobooks, watch movies. You could do all of that for one whole year and your kids are going to be fine. And so
Yeah.
actually like not jumping into being so structured and rigid with a calendar and a schedule. And hear me, I'm a calendar blocking girl. Like I live and die by my calendar. It is my thing that keeps me organized. I love it. But there's also this thing called children and they just don't really understand that as much.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big mistake that people make is really just jumping in too fast. And then I would say number 2 is not actually involving your children in the decisions that you're making about their education. When kids have autonomy or kids have a say or kids have a seat at the table to say, you know what, I really only like reading. I don't really like watching things, or I really love math on the computer. I don't really like to write it in the thing. Or, like when they can actually just be vocal about what they like or don't like, that allows for so much freedom to happen. I think most
Mm.
of the tears in our homeschool, most of the defiance in our homeschool has always come from me being the one saying, you have to do this, and them kind of balking back and not wanting to. And I'm not against pushing kids past a point or having them do things they don't want to do. That's part of life. I don't like doing laundry. I have to do it. It's like it's part of life. But
Yeah.
it's teaching them that in some things you will just have to do things you don't like to do, but let's find the joy in those activities. Let's find the peace in those
Mm.
activities. And so, I have one kiddo that loves math books, and I have another kiddo that only loves to do it on the computer.
Mm.
They're learning math. I don't actually care how they consume it. It's what works for them. So those would be my mistakes that I see people making that can really revolutionize your home education if you just kind of put a lot of the things, list people like, oh, we need to get all this done today. And then you don't get it done and you feel like you failed, but you completed 80% of the list. That's winning. So it's really yeah, that those would be my biggest mistakes I see families making.
Oh my goodness. This whole conversation is just pure gold. I find so many women are just gonna discover freedom here. So tell us, how do they get more of you? How do they dive into this content? Because I know a lot of ladies are like, they're just looking for hope.
Yeah.
Like, throw me a lifeline, send me a boat. I
Yes.
am drowning here. And so you have a calling for this. Like, this is a vision that you have to pursue. And so how do we just dive more into Heather and your mind and your content?
Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel. You can just type in Heather Homeschool anywhere on the internet and it'll come up. That's
Love that.
my job. I know how to SEO everything. So I know how to like come up in Google searches and on YouTube. So I do have a YouTube channel. And then I'm over on Instagram as Miss Heather Torres. That's where I do a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of Q&A. Instagram is such a dynamic platform that allows you to connect with your community. So people send me direct messages. I'll send videos back. I send resources. But yeah, I think YouTube is usually the first place to go because I have some videos on there. But then Instagram would be second. And I'm in the works of planning a book. So hopefully that will be in the not maybe nearest future, but I'm in the process of getting these thoughts down for that to happen. But yeah, it really is it's something that I always say my mess is my message. And I I feel like homeschooling is such it was just so weird to me when I was growing up. It was so like a foreign thing. There was such a stereotype around
Oh,
homeschooling.
yeah.
And it's just not like that anymore. There's so much I love how you keep saying freedom. There's so much freedom in the opportunities we have available as families to live outside of the systems that have been constructed for us
Oh,
and start building our own, strengthening our families, strengthening our kids. Is a hugely
yeah.
it's a big part of why I think God's put me through
Oh,
the mess of homeschool life. So
amen. And I think if there's anything that we can walk away from all of this, truly, it is the family unit that needs to come back together.
mhm,
And when I see moms just overwhelmed and frustrated and pulling their hair out, and I can't wait to get rid of my kids and just send them off to school, I'm like, man, that I just know that that's not by design. That's
mhm,
because we've been put into an ecosystem that isn't fostering what you're talking about. And
yeah,
so I think if we were to take our seeds and put them over into fertile soil and like get this whole thing just shatter the mold, we would find so much joy.
yeah,
And I love having my kids around me all day. I just
mhm,
do, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one thing that I really want to do is I like to just show moms it's possible. It
Mhm.
is so possible. There's seasons to everything, but living a life filled with purpose is completely possible for you and your children. The beauty is that you get to design it however you want. And so it's really the opportunity for us to step out and show other women that you can achieve the dreams and goals that you have, but you can also so value the blessings that God has given you in these children. I think about the kiddos that we've lost babies, and I know that that's an experience you've had, and the idea that
Mhm.
I would want to bash the blessings that have been given is something I consistently think about because there's babies that aren't in my arms that could be here. And there's women who have experienced that. And so I always want to look at this as this is the opportunity that's been given to me. And so I'm going to do everything I can right now with the kiddos that I have. And I'm going to just let go of the society's expectations on
Mhm.
what I should be doing or what my children should be doing. And I'm going to just stand up for who God has made us to be.
Oh, girl, preach, preach. I love it. Right, before we wrap up here, one last thing, as you were talking, I was thinking about this, how much flack I got from family members who were like, "I'm really concerned that your kids aren't like in school right now because they're gonna grow up and fail and they can't read yet." And I'm like, I remember just sticking to my guns and following my gut, even though I was in an environment where there's nobody else really homeschooling. We were out of state. And you know, that's might be part of the journey for some of you guys
Mhm.
is that you might have to like listen to all the negative talk from outsiders and family and people you want to believe in you and maybe they just won't and that
Yep.
has to be okay.
Yep. Yeah, everyone is on their own journey in that, and man, there's I was it's like the homeschool Q&A that your kids get all the time. "Well, do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know this?" And so we've just prepared our kids to, just be truthful in those things, but I think for me, that I I turned from feeling like I needed to prove myself as a mother for making these choices to actually just leaning more into prayer and more into what has God called me to do? Because
Mhm.
someone else may not see the God vision that he has for your life and your family. Like
Mhm.
you, if he's given you that vision, that's for you and you alone. no one else can be in the ring with you. I don't remember. I think it was like Brene Brown said, like, if you're not in the ring
Yeah.
doing this with me, your opinion actually doesn't matter. So I love you, and I have grace for people because I know what it feels like. They're doing it from a place of love, right? They think that they want what's best for you and your family, but if you know that God's called you to do this, then don't go back on the calling. Like, stand on the word that God's given you, and stand up and be the woman that He's created you to be.
Amen. Oh, perfect. Well, I'm wrapping my arms around you. And I can't wait for the ladies to just dive deeper and consume all the stuff that you have. And I've found a lot of inspiration and hope just listening to you. And I've been doing this, so I can only imagine for all of you out there who are just starting. But thank you, Heather.
Thank
Thanks for
you. And
sharing.
I just want to say, Jamie, I just want to first just honor you for creating this space and for being such a leader. One of the things I so admire about you is how you just have so much love and grace for people, and just for your heart for women is just I so admire just the amount of time and energy and love that you put into your community. And so I want to honor you
Thank
for even
you.
creating this space as a busy, successful entrepreneur and mom to even do these types of things is so, it so speaks to the character that you are, that you have. And I'm just so grateful that we get to be friends and do life together.
Me too. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yay.